Time forgot these stars, but death did too. They were born before television existed, and somehow they're still here. One dance legend is 99 and still moves better than most 30-year-olds. A glamorous actress just hit 100 and remembers working with Marlon Brando like it was yesterday. Meanwhile, a beloved TV dad is pushing 100 and was literally dancing on a desk on TV last year. From World War II to TikTok, they've seen it all, and unlike their famous friend, they lived to tell about it. Dick Van Dyke. Dick Van Dyke was born in 1925, and now, at 99 years old, he's still going strong. For more than 70 years, he's made people laugh, sing, and smile. His energy, humor, and love for performing made him one of the most beloved stars in Hollywood. It didn't matter if he was dancing on rooftops or cracking jokes on TV, people loved watching him. His big break came on Broadway in the late 1950s. Then, in 1960, he got a role in Bye Bye Birdie that won him a Tony Award. That moment changed everything. Suddenly, everyone wanted to see more of Dick Van Dyke. He had a style that was playful and light, but also smart. You never knew what he'd do next, but you knew it would be good. Soon after, he became a regular face on television. From 1961 to 1966, he played Rob Petrie on The Dick Van Dyke Show. It was a huge hit. He worked alongside Mary Tyler Moore, and together, they became one of TV's favorite couples. He wasn't just funny, he was a genius at physical comedy. One look, one stumble, and he had the whole country laughing. He won 3 Emmy Awards for the show. It wasn't just about the jokes, it was the way he moved, the way he reacted, the way he made everything look easy. But Van Dyke didn't stop at TV. In 1964, he starred in Mary Poppins as both Bert the Chimney Sweep and the old bank manager. The dancing, the songs, the charm, he lit up the screen. Even though people still tease him about his British accent, it didn't matter. He was unforgettable. Not long after, someone offered him the role of James Bond. He laughed and said, "Have you heard my British accent?" That kind of honesty made people love him even more. In 1968, he played Caractacus Potts in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. It was a colorful, wild story about a magical car, and Van Dyke made it even more magical. Kids loved it. Parents did too. Decades later, it still has a special place in people's hearts, even if the child catcher gave a few of them nightmares. As the years went on, he kept working. In the 70s, he returned to TV with the new Dick Van Dyke Show. In the 90s, he starred in Diagnosis, Murder as a Doctor Who Solved Crimes. He even made appearances in films like Dick Tracy and Night at the Museum. At 93, he danced and sang again in Mary Poppins Return, proving he still had that spark. Even as he nears 100, Van Dyke hasn't slowed down much. In 2024, for his 99th birthday, he said he was talking with a studio about a new role. He joked about playing someone's grandfather on a sitcom, just to stay busy. That's the kind of spirit he has, always looking forward, always wanting to entertain. He's proud of his career. When asked about his favorite moments, he mentioned the Dick Van Dyke Show and Mary Poppins. He knows the world has changed. Fame doesn't last the way it used to, but he's thankful. He got to do what he loved, and people loved him for it. In April 2025, he had to cancel some events. Traveling and meeting big crowds had become too hard. When asked how he was doing, he smiled and said, "I feel old," and joked that he was praying to make it to 99. Even in that moment, his humor came through. That's who he is. Eva Marie Saint. Eva Marie Saint's story didn't begin in the spotlight. She was born on the 4th of July in 1924 in Newark, New Jersey, far from Hollywood. After college, she wasn't whisked into fame. She started small, working as a page at NBC and hustling in New York. She took every opportunity she could, acting on radio and television during the late 1940s. Before most people even knew her name, she was already being called the Helen Hayes of television. She had talent, and those in the industry saw it early. But her big break came in 1954, and it was massive. Her very first movie role was in On the Waterfront, a film that became a classic, and she was cast opposite Marlon Brando. Most actors dream of this kind of chance. She didn't just play her part well, she won an Academy Award for it. Imagine stepping onto a film set for the first time and walking away with an Oscar. She was paid only $7,500 for that role, but the impact it had on her career was was priceless. That movie wasn't just important on screen. Behind the scenes, things were intense. The director, Elia Kazan, used psychology to get a real emotional performance out of her. He purposely created tension between her and Brando to make their scenes feel more real. Saint once said Kazan told her not to let Brando into a room, no matter what. Then Brando came in teasing her, trying to throw her off. She stayed off balance during the whole shoot, and it worked. The emotions felt raw, honest, and unforgettable. After that, she didn't just stick to one kind of role. In 1959, she teamed up with Alfred Hitchcock for North by Northwest. This wasn't just another job, it was a full transformation. Hitchcock didn't want the serious, dramatic version of Saint. He took her shopping himself, helped pick out her wardrobe, and even coached her voice to be softer, lower, more mysterious. He told her to look Cary Grant in the eyes at all times, to avoid moving her hands, and to lower her voice. He wanted elegance, style, something different, and she delivered. That performance became one of her most iconic. Hitchcock made it clear he didn't want her doing sync-to-sync movies anymore. No more black and white dramas in gloomy apartments. He wanted her to be the kind of woman audiences looked up to, not someone they saw scrubbing dishes. She made that shift easily, proving she could be both powerful and glamorous. She didn't chase fame the way some stars do. She chose her projects carefully, appearing in only about 20 feature films across her long career. Every role had weight. She starred in powerful dramas like Exodus, A Hatful of Rain, and lighter, timely films like The Russians Are Coming, The Russians Are Coming. She even showed up in Superman Returns in 2006, playing Ma Kent, while old footage of Brando, her first co-star, appeared as Superman's father. That full-circle moment said a lot about how long and meaningful her journey had been. What really sets her apart is how she lived her life outside the spotlight. She married director Jeffrey Hayden in 1951, and they stayed married for 65 years until he passed away. That kind of commitment is rare in Hollywood. Even when she wasn't filming, she was active, performing stage readings, working with young writers, and staying involved in the arts. She never stopped giving back. Eva Marie Saint finally stepped away from acting in 2021 at the age of 97. Few people in Hollywood can say they had a career that lasted nearly 80 years, and even fewer can say they stayed true to themselves while doing it. At 100 years old, she's not just the oldest living Academy Award winner, she's a living link to the golden age of cinema. Mel Brooks. Mel Brooks was born in 1926, and nearly a century later, he's still making people laugh. At 98 years old, he's not just a legend, he's a living piece of comedy history. He's one of the very few people in the world who have won an Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony. And just when you think he's done it all, he gets an honorary Oscar in 2024. His career is like a highlight reel that never ends. It all started in the early days of television. He was a young comedy writer working on Your Show of Shows, one of the most important TV programs of its time. He wasn't alone. He was surrounded by future giants like Neil Simon and Woody Allen. In that room, jokes flew faster than the camera could catch them. That's also where he met Carl Reiner, a friendship that turned into one of the funniest acts ever, The 2,000-Year-Old Man. What began as a joke between friends turned into hit comedy albums, and years later, it even won him a Grammy. At one point, those albums were the only thing keeping him afloat financially. He was broke, but his wit paid the bills. Brooks didn't stop there. He turned a strange idea about a musical celebrating Hitler into the producers, and somehow it worked. Not only did he win an Oscar for it, he later turned it into a Broadway hit that broke records. Most people create one version of something and move on. Brooks made the same story a success in film and on stage, years apart. Then came the 1970s, his golden decade. In 1974, he released Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein, two comedy classics in the same year. One tackled racism in the Old West with a joke-per-minute pace. The other was a black-and-white love letter to old monster movies. Gene Wilder shined in both. Brooks, though, didn't just stay behind the camera. In Blazing Saddles, he played 5 different roles, some of them without credit. That's the kind of wild energy he brought to everything. But there's more to him than just laughs. He quietly started a film company called Brooks Films and produced serious, powerful movies like The Elephant Man and The Fly. He kept his name off the credits because because he knew people expected jokes. He didn't want the audience to be distracted by the idea of a Mel Brooks movie when the story was meant to be serious. That kind of self-awareness is rare, especially in show business. His personal life was just as remarkable. He was married to actress Anne Bancroft for 41 years, which is practically unheard of in Hollywood. Their home was full of humor, even during awkward moments. Once, their son Max showed up to a dinner party dressed as an SS officer, just to push buttons. Brooks was horrified. Bancroft, though, looked at her son and calmly said, "Max, epaulets? Really?" That kind of wit ran through their whole family. Max, by the way, became a successful writer too. He wrote World War Z. Even as he neared 100, Brooks kept working. In 2021, he released a memoir. In 2023, he came back with History of the World, Part 2 for Hulu, more than 40 years after the original film. He even did voice work in big movies like Toy Story 4. He appeared in TV shows. He stayed visible. He stayed funny. And most importantly, he stayed Mel Brooks. James Hong. James Hong's life is the kind of story you don't hear every day. He was born in 1929 in Minneapolis, Minnesota, to Chinese immigrants. His dad ran an herb shop, and that's where it all started. Peking opera performers would come by the shop, and little James watched them with wide eyes. He was supposed to become an engineer. He even got a degree from USC, but his heart was never in it. In 1953, he took a chance and ran straight into Hollywood. But Hollywood wasn't kind to people who looked like James back then. White actors were still playing Asian characters in makeup, and roles for real Asian Americans were rare, often flat or downright offensive. James saw that, and instead of waiting around, he made his own path. He joined forces with actor Mako Iwamatsu and started East West Players, a theater group made just for Asian American actors. This wasn't just about acting, it was about survival, about carving out space in a world that didn't want to make room. At one point, 70% of Asian American actors in Hollywood were connected to East West Players. That's how big an impact he had. His acting career took off in the 1950s with a string of supporting roles in movies alongside Hollywood heavyweights like Clark Gable and John Wayne. They weren't lead roles, but they opened the door, and James kept walking through it. He acted non-stop, year after year, show after show, movie after movie. He'd show up on TV 10 times in a year, each time playing someone completely different. He had to be versatile because he had no other choice. He took whatever he could get and made it unforgettable. Then the 1980s hit, and suddenly, James wasn't just another character actor, he was a legend in the making. If you've ever seen Big Trouble in Little China, you know Lo Pan, that ghostly villain with wild eyes and a twisted sense of humor. That's James. And just a few years earlier, he popped up in Blade Runner as the man who built the replicant's eyes. It was a small role, but he made it count. Whether it was horror, sci-fi, comedy, or drama, he left a mark. He even played a magical dry cleaner in Tales from the Dark Side and the no-nonsense maître d' in Seinfeld's The Chinese Restaurant episode. People didn't always know his name, but they remembered his face and his voice. That voice became just as iconic. In Mulan, he was Chi Fu, the uptight advisor. In Kung Fu Panda, he was Po's dad, the lovable noodle-making goose. And when that series got a holiday special, his performance won him an Annie Award. He kept going, lending his voice to shows and movies into his 90s, including Turning Red and Wendell and Wild in 2022. That same year, something magical happened. At 93, James took on a major role in Everything Everywhere All at Once. Surrounded by an incredible cast, he delivered a performance that felt both fresh and timeless. The film won awards, and so did James. The Screen Actors Guild honored the whole cast, and James stood on that stage, showing the world he was still at the top of his game. Then came something long overdue, a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He became the oldest person ever to receive one. There were lion dancers and big speeches. Jamie Lee Curtis spoke. Daniel Day Kim, who led the campaign to get him that star, stood proudly beside him. It wasn't just about James getting a star, it was about what he represented: decades of struggle, persistence, and the refusal to fade into the background. James has always been honest about what it was like to be an Asian actor in early Hollywood. He played a lot of Chinaman roles, as he bluntly puts it. Hats, accents, cliches, the whole thing. But he took those small parts and used them as stepping stones. he never stopped pushing forward, and he didn't just work for himself, he opened doors for others. As a member of the Academy, he still speaks out for young Asian and Pacific Islander talent, reminding the world there's still more work to do. Even now, in his 90s, he isn't slowing down. He's producing a movie called Patsy Lee and the Keepers of the Five Kingdoms. Still working, still creating, still dreaming. Jamie Lee Curtis said it best at his star ceremony, "It's about fucking time." She's right. James Hong gave everything to Hollywood, and finally, Hollywood gave something back. Elizabeth Waldo. Elizabeth Waldo was born in 1918 in Yakima, Washington, near the Yakima Indian Reservation. By the age of 3, she was already singing. By 5, she was playing the violin. Her talent stood out early, and the famous violinist Jascha Heifetz saw it. He helped her get a scholarship to the Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia, where she trained in classical music. In 1940, her life took a big turn. Conductor Leopold Stokowski invited her to join the All-American Youth Orchestra. She toured across North and South America, and those travels changed her forever. She heard traditional music in places she'd never been, and it lit a fire in her. She started collecting ancient instruments and fell in love with the idea of preserving music from cultures long past. When the orchestra broke up during World War II, she joined the Los Angeles Philharmonic for a short time. But Waldo wasn't meant to stay in one place. She headed to Mexico, where her music found a new rhythm. She performed on national radio and worked with Agustin Lara, one of the country's most beloved singers. She also met muralist Diego Rivera, who saw something special in her. He pushed her to create a way to write music for pre-Columbian instruments, music that had never been written down before. In 1945, Elizabeth Waldo stepped into the world of Hollywood. She played a violinist in the movie Song of Mexico. Her sister, Janet Waldo, had been discovered by Bing Crosby, which helped Elizabeth get her foot in the door. She ended up working on several films, playing in orchestras for Crosby's movies. Big composers like Maurice Jarre and Lalo Schifrin admired her unique sound. Her work even found its way into Dr. Zhivago, where her music helped shape the film's emotional depth. A few years later, she toured with Ima Sumac, a Peruvian-American soprano known for blending Andean folk songs with jazz, opera, and Caribbean rhythms. They played in Hollywood, Las Vegas, and even Europe. This experience pushed Waldo to explore music from many cultures and find ways to blend them together. Then came her most groundbreaking work. In the late 1950s, she began recording albums with ancient instruments no one had ever heard in a recording studio before. Her albums, Maracatu, Rites of the Pagan, and Realm of the Incas, were ahead of their time. They didn't just document music from the past, they created something new, using ancient sounds. Jazz producer Gene Norman, who worked with her, called the experience unforgettable. She didn't stop there. In the 1970s, she started scoring films like Chac, Dios de la Lluvia, and Lost on Paradise Island. By the 1980s, her curiosity turned toward Chinese music. She formed a Pan-Asian ensemble that performed in schools across Los Angeles and even toured in China. Her piece, Concierto Indo-Americano, was performed with the Xi'an Symphony Orchestra. It was yet another example of how she brought different worlds together through music. Elizabeth Waldo also believed deeply in education. She created a cultural center called Rancho Cordillera del Norte in Northridge, California. It wasn't just her home. It had a 150-seat theater where she hosted concerts and taught others. She also started the New Mission Theater, a space dedicated to multicultural music and arts. Even as she got older, her passion never faded. In the 2000s, she released more albums, including Land of Golden Dreams and Heartstrings Soul of the Americas. At age 97, she was still composing, this time a piece about Chinese immigrants during the gold rush. Now, at 106, Elizabeth Waldo is one of the last living ties to Hollywood's golden age. But her legacy is much bigger than that. She didn't just perform music, she saved it, transformed it, and used it to connect people across continents and centuries. Jacqueline White. Jacqueline White was born in Beverly Hills in 1922, and for a short time in the 1940s, she lit up Hollywood screens with quiet strength. Now, over 100 years old, she's one one of the last people alive who lived and worked during Hollywood's golden age. Her time in the spotlight didn't last long, just about 10 years. But her work still speaks to anyone who loves classic film, especially the dark, gritty world of film noir. Her entry into acting came by chance. At just 17, while performing in a UCLA theater class, a casting director spotted her. That small moment changed everything. Soon after, she took a screen test and signed a contract with MGM in 1942. But even with her talent and beauty, the studio didn't give her much to work with. Like many young actresses under contract at the time, she found herself playing background characters while MGM focused on their bigger names. Still, those early roles helped her grow. She appeared in several studio films, including a comedy with Laurel and Hardy called Air Raid Wardens. She also had a part in Song of Russia and reunited with an old friend in 3 Hearts for Julia. These small wins added up, but she was still waiting for something more. That something came when she left MGM and moved to RKO Pictures in 1947. At RKO, she finally started landing the kinds of roles that showed what she could really do. She was cast as second lead in major films and even got top billing in smaller productions. These were her best years in the industry, and in just a few short years, she built a strong and lasting filmography. One of her standout roles was in Crossfire, a film that didn't shy away from difficult topics like anti-Semitism. That same year, she took on a softer role in Banjo and later appeared in the action-packed Mystery in Mexico. In The Western Return of the Bad Men, she worked alongside Randolph Scott, who she later remembered as kind and respectful. Westerns became a small but important part of her resume, with 2 more films following shortly after. But the movie that sealed her legacy was The Narrow Margin, released in 1952. It was a tense, low-budget noir that turned out to be a masterpiece. Oddly enough, she had already left Hollywood when she got the role. After marrying Bruce Anderson in 1948 and moving to Wyoming, she thought her acting days were over. But during a short trip back to Los Angeles, she ran into director Richard Fleischer and producer Stanley Rubin at the RKO commissary. That random encounter brought her back for one last film. Even that movie had its share of drama. After it was finished, RKO's new owner, Howard Hughes, held it back for 2 years, unsure whether to re-edit it or remake it with bigger stars. In the end, only a few scenes were reshot, and the final version was released mostly untouched. It was worth the wait. Critics praised the film's tight story and suspense, and even today, it holds a perfect score on Rotten Tomatoes. And then, just like that, she walked away. At only 28, she chose family over fame. While others chased roles and clung to the spotlight, Jacqueline White built a life far from the cameras. She raised 5 children in Wyoming and stayed married for over 50 years. Her husband passed away in 2000, but their long life together tells its own story, one of quiet commitment and a clear sense of priorities. In later years, she made rare public appearances, sometimes attending film festivals where younger fans discovered her work for the first time. Seeing her in person, people were reminded that the golden age of movies isn't just something you read about. It was lived by real people, and she is one of the few who can still tell those stories firsthand. At 102, she's not just a memory from the past. She's a living link to a time when Hollywood was at its most magical. Her films, especially The Narrow Margin, have found new audiences, and her performances continue to stand out for their quiet honesty. She didn't need long speeches or flashy scenes. She made you believe every word, every glance. In a world where careers are often measured by how long they last, Jacqueline White proved that sometimes a short, brilliant moment can leave the deepest mark.